Hello. There's a YouTuber called The Britisher who does a weekly rundown of the news. It's called The Week That Was, which I assume is a reference to a 1960s satirical TV show called That Was the Week That Was. The Britisher's videos are always presented in a very entertaining and cogent style, and I recommend him unreservedly. I always enjoy his output, although I might not get round to it every week. So it was that I missed last week's offering, and therefore I hadn't heard his opinions about the truck convoy until this week's episode. Apparently, in the previous one and in this one, he was quite forthright in his criticism of the truckers, and this attracted accusations that he was a Nazi or something. So first, I have to insist that the Britisher is not a Nazi. I also have to insist that he has a right to his opinion. As a matter of fact, that's the very definition of not being a Nazi, isn't it? Allowing other people to have their own opinions, which might be at variance with your own. And there's absolutely no doubt that he made some cogent points. I'll leave a link to his latest video in the description. But to boil it down, he said that we can't be allowed simply to indulge in public disruption because we don't like something our government's doing. He makes the very valid point that when a majority of the people have voted for a certain government and that government has a certain agenda, then your recourse should be the ballot box and not the barricade. That's my phraseology, not his. I'm rather proud of that one. Now, I don't want any comments about Trudeau not having a majority government. I know it's a minority, but he is supported by other parties and they've stuck by him even through this. So, a majority of a sort. Back now to the Britisher. He points out that we all cheered when Extinction Rebellion and BLM were mopped up. Sorry, phone call. Oh, sorry about that. Where was I? Oh, yeah, it was about the Britisher saying that we all cheered when Extinction Rebellion and BLM were, well, closed down, or their disruptions were closed down. Oh, and just a minute. By the way, one of the comments under my video, the one about the Mounties, pushing their horses into the crowd, oh dear. They had it that a horse of that type doesn't charge into a crowd. And thank you, Britisher. I hope you're watching this because you saved me a bit of research. Because in the video about which I'm talking, the one in which you're giving your views about the truckers, you show a clip of the mounted police here in London charging at some speed into a crowd of BLM demonstrators, scattering them far and wide. Therefore, I repeat again, although I could well believe that Trudeau had told the commander of the Mounties to send in the horses at a gallop, those guys, as bad as it was, they were showing pretty good restraint, considering the size and weight of the horses they were riding. I'm nowhere near being in sympathy with the cause they were supporting. But I can assure you all, they were the best behaved police I've seen in this whole sorry mess. Again, I say, that doesn't make them right, just a lot less wrong than the others. Okay, but back to the Britisher. I profoundly disagree with him about the validity of the truckers' protest, and I don't think he was right to draw a parallel between the truckers and the two recent disruptions we had from BLM and Extinction Rebellion. First of all, let's look at those two. In the case of BLM, they were breaking windows, throwing things at the police, destroying or desecrating statues and memorials, and they were threatening passers-by, none of which the truckers did. BLM concentrated on insulting British history and British culture, and, by the way, they were led by a ludicrous LARPer called Sasha Johnson, who really looks like this, but role plays like this, adopting the gorilla all black, including a Che Guevara beret. In other words, it was all about optics and there was no substance there at all. The BLM call was for an end to systemic racism against black people, which is ludicrous in the UK. And they even called for an end to police murders targeting black people, which again is nonsense over here. The police here, by the way, when they get hold of guns, seem to be singularly trigger happy. But it turns out they're equal opportunity murderers. Now, to Extinction Rebellion, which is a death cult led by Roger Hallam, a man with the piercing eyes of a fanatic, and a woman called Gail Bradbrook, who had her epiphany about the imminent doom of the planet after she fried her brain with a series of native hallucinogens in Costa Rica, and reckoned she came out of the terrifying experience with a plan. Now, I don't know about you, but if any politician stood on a podium and asked you to vote for him or her and gave as his or her justification for standing that he or she had taken a whole lot of psychotropics which gave him or her terrifying visions that offered a solution to the world's problems, well, I wouldn't vote for him. So Hallam and Bradbrook decided to marshal the forces of the mostly middle class to force the government, and this is the important bit, to force the government to enact laws that the majority of the population had not voted for. While, as I said, BLM seemed to have no particular agenda at all beyond disruption and destruction. Now, back to the truckers. They didn't want to force the government to enact laws, but they did have an agenda, and it was this. All they wanted, they were just begging for the restrictive laws to be dropped, laws that had been enacted during, well, what was seen as a period of international emergency, and which many countries did not adopt, and those that did are in the process of abandoning them now. So it wasn't like they were asking for anything that wasn't happening elsewhere. Of course, the fact that most countries are abandoning these laws doesn't make them right. The majority isn't always right. But I want to remind you, the Canadian government was insisting that truckers wear masks in their cabs while they were alone. So no, I think the truckers had a point. And as far as I could say, they didn't go to Ottawa with the intention of shutting down the Canadian economy, causing disruption or changing the government. They went in masses to show how serious they were about the problem of continued restrictions, and they went with the intention of talking to Trudeau. If he'd met them straight away, I'm pretty sure they'd all have turned round and gone back home. And this is where we can see there's something seriously wrong with the Trudeau side of the argument. Trudeau not only refused to meet them, he made the excuse of COVID contact and ran away. Even if the COVID excuse had been true, and I don't think for a moment anyone actually believes that, even if it had been true, he could have participated in a video conference, couldn't he? No, something is very wrong there. After that, or before that, or during that, I don't know, whenever, Trudeau started lobbying a whole lot of ridiculous and slanderous accusations about the truckers, calling them misogynists, for goodness sake, transphobics. I mean, what the hell would that have to do with the demonstration, even if it had been true? Oh, and fascists, of course. He lied about the demonstration being full of swastikas and Confederate flags. You see, you absolutely must realise something's wrong when the leader of a government can't talk to his own people and instead starts calumnying them with a list of increasingly bizarre lies. Then there's the bank accounts. Even cafes who sold coffee to the demonstrators are finding themselves on the receiving end of police harassment. Donors are finding their bank accounts being interfered with. You know, this is really deep stuff. So, back to the Britisher. No, you aren't a Nazi, but in my humble opinion, you are completely wrong here. Yes, I agreed with the damping down of Extinction Rebellion and their demos and the BLM demos, not because I disagreed with their ideas, which I do, but that's another matter, but because they were disrupting a peaceful society with no proper agenda and no other goal than bringing down the established order. They wanted, in both cases, they wanted to bring down the government. I'm with the truckers because all they wanted was to be able to drive their lorries. And it just so happens that in so doing, they exposed a rottenness and a dishonesty in the Canadian government that I do sincerely hope will not be forgotten. And yes, I do think it was justified. I wish their return home to be a peaceful one. I hope their families and friends will rally round and help them while they're being strangled by the banks. And I believe that their message will ultimately get through to the rest of the country. But I especially wish that the mainstream media, who were compliant in this travesty of civilization, will completely collapse over their conduct in this business. Right, well, I'm Graniopteryx. I'm on YouTube, Rumble, BitChute and Minds. My Twitter, Gab and Parler handle is @Graniopteryx, and I'll let you know through those platforms when I upload a video. Please like the video, share it, make sure your subscription is up to date, and, well, I'll see you again next time. Why not treat yourself or a favoured relative or friend to these magnificent examples of merch? The mugs and t-shirts come in the Graniopteryx design or Grambo with a firearm or the more deadly knitting needles. Go to www.graniopteryx.com and whatever platform you're watching this on, please click like, subscribe and share.